Now we're halfway through the third session. So our next speaker is Professor Hyungon Moon in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, and he will talk about his class. Okay, please go ahead, Professor Moon.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Today, I'll be briefly introducing my experiences on teaching a computer systems course fully remotely for the 15 minutes I've got. So, as mentioned, the computer science courses are typically composed of theory-oriented courses and practice-oriented courses. And like coincidentally, the course that I taught last semester, which is computer security, is kind of composed of theory part and practice part. In theory part, we basically introduce some algorithms and some proof sketches or protocol concepts, like using some slides. And in practice part, we also introduce like techniques of how we can hack some systems or how we can like defend those attacks with some hands-on labs and assignments or some demonstrations. So before talking about how I taught my course online, I'd like to introduce how I have taught my course when I could teach in offline. So basically, the course is much like a series of seminars with small difference that the content is basically for the course. So the main part is the slide presentation to show some examples and diagrams. And it is pretty typical that even if we are teaching the courses offline, we are providing those slides in advance. We do our best. And the reason why we rely on these slides is that there are many examples that we could hardly draw on like chalkboard or blackboard. And with this, we also use some chalkboard like whiteboards from time to time if we need to make some note or to answer the questions. Basically, I prefer to draw directly on the presentation, the slides, but in many cases, it is really hard to draw something on the slides directly. And the third part is also the discussion. I highly encourage the students to ask questions, because when I teach security, it is really hard to teach every single aspect completely. So students often have some questions, many of which are pretty brilliant. So from those questions, we start our short discussion, which could become a really long one. So we have also some discussions. And this is basically a photo of our classroom, which is unfortunately empty. And there is the place I can show slide, and beside there is whiteboard, and students are supposed to be there. So it is really easy to discuss topics with students. And one thing unique to computer system course or security course is that we also have some hands-on labs with some demonstrations. So we have to show some codes like this or some command like this. As you can see, it is really hard to read those text. Yeah, it is kind of dessert. And because of that, when I present, I make those size of those texts pretty much larger. So what we can see is that it looks pretty doable online, right? So how I have migrated from offline to online is that the left shows the classroom before the pandemic, and the right shows the setup of my desk, which is pretty much like the normal setup, but little adjustment for the online lectures. So first two parts, the presentation and the whiteboard parts, can be migrated easily to the iPad, maybe because I have long been using the iPad with some pen inputs. So I can easily share my screen using the screen share features, which all the online meeting softwares have. And because I also use the MacBook, which you can see beside the iPad, and because they are really tightly connected, I can easily share my handwritings on the slides with the students. Although it kind of causes some network problems, there's no problem in delivering the main course contents. And the second part, the fourth part I want to discuss is the hands-on lab. And this is also actually not a big problem if we are focusing on the demonstration. I can just open up those terminal or those development environment on my computer, and I can just share it with the students. There are small potential problem that my monitors might be much better than the students, so I may need to make some adjustments. But basically, there's not a big problem in sharing that. So basically, in terms of delivery, the share screen feature available around is more than enough. But one potential limitation is from the student interactions UX perspective. So the goal is that to interact with students, I really want to, or the lecturers really want to observe the students' reactions, like their facial motions, or if they're looking at my slides, or if they're looking at their own laptops or something. And I also want to take questions from the students. So what I have done is that this is pretty much available for if you're using Zoom, and not really available if you're using, I think, Collaborate, is that in offline classroom, we can observe the students easily because they are sitting on those chairs. So what I have done is that I use the gallery view mode, which is displaying all the student cameras in one screen. It was possible because my class was really small, of 33 students, and I could easily observe the students. And for the instructions to take the questions, I could easily take them through the mics or chats. But in reality, what happens is that students really don't want to turn on the cameras, and I actually didn't really encourage them to use the cameras because I was concerned about the network problems, neither the mic. But what I did observe is that students do chat much more frequently, which I'll discuss pretty much later, soon. So in theory, there's no problem in the student interaction. So we can operate our lecture pretty much the same as the offline one, even if we have to do it online. And even in some sense, there are some benefits that I could observe in terms of participation. It seems that there is the bar of engaging in the lecture, bar of asking questions or bar of participating discussions. If you're using chat, it's much lower. Because I added those in the grading scheme, I had to count how many students did actively participated the discussions, and I found that 13 out of 33 students have actively engaged at least once, which is pretty much higher because in previous course operated offline, I have observed only 3 to 5 students out of 33 students have participated actively. And in the extreme, one student participated 17 times during the semester. Considering that we have, I think, 26 individual lectures, it is a pretty high number. It seems that it is really easy to engage because unlike the offline lecture, even if you chat, even if you ask questions using the chat, it doesn't really interrupt the lecture. So the lecturer has to actively observe the chat room, and lecturer can decide when to start the discussion and when to start answering the question. So this might have lowered the bar to the students. But one potential challenge that I haven't really tried to overcome is the tapping student out, which have mentioned by the other professors. So this happens when students have to work on the assignments in our class, computer science classes. So our students works on an assignment, and if the student find it very easy, then the student will happily submit the result. But in many cases, they hit obstacles, so they need or want to visit the TA or attend the help out session that I typically run. So if you start a help out session, what has to happen is that what typically happens offline is that there are three parties. There are students, and there is instructor or TA, and there should be a physical machine because those assignments are typically the programming one. So we have to interact with the computer physically together, and at the same time we want to talk about the problems and the potential solutions. And what I found is that although I haven't tried in the class, what I have tried when I meet with my lab members is that we can replace the talk with calls and chats very easily. And because Zoom, like modern meeting systems, have remote control features, we could actually, the TAs could remotely control the students' computer if they trust the TA enough to replace the physical interaction with the student's machine and the TA's machine. And by doing this, we could solve the problem of the last limitations of the online class in terms of student interaction. So it seems that there's not much problem. Because modern meeting softwares have all the necessary features. But as the other professors have also mentioned, the bigger challenge is in evaluation. In terms of programming assignments, actually, there are a lot of challenges even in the offline courses when we are teaching the computer systems course. Because there is a lot of cost in developing a new assignments, so we typically use existing assignments, and we can easily Google to find model solutions for those assignments. So it's not really a big dual issue in the online course. But maybe because I'm a security major, there are three reasons why doing the exams over online is inherently challenging. The three reasons are that we cannot really limit the internet access, although there are software that they claim they can do, but it is not possible. And it is really hard to identify who is really taking the exam. And we can actually cannot see who is beside the students. So we can easily compare those situations using these photos. So in offline exam, we can easily limit the access to the lecture room. So we can make sure that there's no one beside the students, beside the fellow students. Unlike that, even if we are seeing all the cameras, we cannot make sure that there's no one beside the students. And similarly, we can observe the students' faces or hands easily, but we cannot observe easily in one eye, and so on. So there's inherent limitation. And unlike the lectures, the students are incentivized to cheat, basically, even if many of them are honest, but there are some students. So this makes big difference between the lectures and exams. So what I tried in this semester is that I assumed that there's no way to overcome those differences as the other professors did. So my try was also the essay writing. In my case, I did the live essay writing using the Google Docs. There's a long story, but the reason why I chose Google Docs is that by using it, I can actually see not only the result, but also the history of making changes to the essay. And I can potentially see the evidence of potential copy pasting. Because if you genuinely write let's say using the Google Docs, you will be updating the documents really incrementally, which Google will log. But if you copy paste some others result to the documents directly, you will see some imminent change, like sudden changes. And by using Google Docs, you can also make it very difficult for the students to share their documents, their accounts, because it is Google. You really don't want to share your Google accounts with someone else. So that is the reason why I chose Google Docs. But frankly, it was not really scalable, so I'll be moving on to the other option in this semester. And in addition, I gave the individual topics as much as possible to the students so that they can hardly cheat inside the class. So this is my experience, but it was not very successful. I don't think this try was very successful, and I couldn't make sure that they didn't really cheat between those essays. And one thing I want to remark in terms of technical problems, which is pretty much independent of the others, is that I did experience some network delays, which might be the problem of the school-wide network. In this sense, because many online courses are starting at the same time, for instance, 1 p.m., what I found is that students seems to have some problem in joining the classroom. So I typically had to start 5 minutes later. And I also did observe the student side problems. When you use BB Collaborate, we can also check the network quality of the student side. And 1 or 2 students in my classroom have consistently bad network connectivity. Maybe because of the student side network problem, which we can hardly overcome. So those network delays are something that we will not be able to, I think, overcome. And we can also hardly consider all the variations of the student side equipment. So this might be another problem. What I have noticed is that some students seem to watch the lectures from the phone, which is because they are not really willing to listen to the talk. But yeah, we may want to consider those situations also. In summary, which is my last slide, it seems that at least in the computer systems course, online lectures can give pretty much the same experiences if we rule out the problem of the network. So there's no problem in interactions or delivery. But what is still unknown is that if all the students will have the same experiences. And if not, what can we do for those students? There are students who cannot afford good enough client device that they need to attend the class. So what can we do for them? And the evaluation remains as a challenge. For the courses hundreds or 200 of students, maybe it's not at all applicable. But what I'll try for the next semester is our exams, which has been kind of effective in assessing the achievement of the individual students, even for the offline classes. For this, professors will interview the students for 30 minutes or 1 hour individually to see how much the student learned and the level of the understandings of each students. If the class is the size of 30 or 40 students, maybe it's kind of doable solutions. And what we cannot rule out fundamentally is the technical problem, which will and not limit the number of online classes that we can provide. And lastly, what I want to suggest for pandemic-induced online lectures, which means that all the courses have to be taught online, is that maybe we want to plan some offline exam dates in addition to the offline lab dates carefully for the courses really want to have offline exams, like those for the freshman courses. And to minimize the network problems, we may want to distribute the courses more evenly, more evenly than the earlier, so that the university network will be able to handle those traffic without any problem. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Moon. Professor Moon also talked about many benefits as well as challenges of online education that he has experienced, and probably a lot of us might also share it. And then he also provided some suggestions, and some are some technical issues, but I think they are very, very important for better online education.